Doll Wars, Vigilus, Defiant. Chapter 4, They Came from Below. To any Imperial forces in range, I am Astropath Primus Helena Arcan of the Lunar Choir of Neovelum, Moon of Vigilus. Status update. Vigilus remains in Imperial control, mostly due to the efforts of the Death Watch and scattered elements of the Ultramarines. However, Chaos, Orc, and Dark Eldari attacks are increasing in frequency, and we are beginning to lose some ground. Imperial reinforcement to stabilize the region is a necessity. We hold for now, but are on the knife's edge. Message repeats. To any Imperial forces in range, I am... The Gore Wolf was annoyed. The constant weeping of the captives and slaves had started as a source of joy for the Demon Prince. Their misery fed his anticipation of spilling their blood. But now, irritants. The wind tore again across the barren mountain plateau, rippling cultist cloaks and causing torches planted into the ground to waver and flicker. The trenches were nearly completely carved, shallow but wide, and intricately worked into a blasphemous pattern. Around the perimeter of the design, the Dark Apostle of the World Eaters began arranging the prisoners at key points, each guarded by a knife-wielding member of the cult. The Demon Prince couldn't remember his name. Honestly, all mortals had begun to look the same to his warp-altered sight. A rattling, clanking sound drew his attention to the far end of the plateau. Their guests of honor were trying to break free of their chains again. Squatting mountainously, bound at legs, weapon arms, and over the torso were two Imperial Knights. The chains holding them had been carefully wrapped to cover the cockpit hatch, keeping the pilots contained inside their hapless constructs. Each was painted in the livery of Liberation Ventures, the hated mercenary night company that had thwarted his plans so often on Mithras. The first was armed with two massive thermal cannons called the Rock of the Faithful. The second was armed for close combat with oversized fist and chainsword, and was known as the Doom of the Wicked. The two had worked together as a team for centuries, pilots differing through the decades, but always a sibling pair. They had reaped fearsome tally and gained a mighty reputation, but now that roll of honors would come to an end. The Gore Wolf would have his revenge. The battle to bring down these knights was hard fought, but brief. A lightning assault on their camp in the dawn hours had caught them by surprise, and the World Eaters' Rhino transports had driven into their midst before the towering war engines could fully rouse their reactors. The meager human troop complement on guard fell to chain axe and fist with ease, and the prince had almost wished they still had their Space Marine escorts on hand to put up a decent fight. In the end, the groggy, half-roused knights had been battered to the ground by his Terminator-armored allies and chained, and those same allies now stood sentry over the two engines. The pilots within had not been allowed to sleep in 3 days, forced to witness the preparation of their doom. Now, as the chanting began to escalate in volume, it was time for this first step of his revenge. "My lord, mighty gold-turned-brass," said the cult leader, only distinguished from the other mortals by his pathetically ingratiating wolf mask. The attempt to emulate the Gore Wolf caused a snarl to ripple across the prince's muzzle. The cultist shrank back and managed to find his voice after a few attempts. The ritual is about to begin." The Demon Prince stayed his hand and moved to stand behind the Apostle, looming over the Legionnaire, a mass of rage shaped into a winged slab of muscle. The ritual began, various calls and responses going between the Dark Apostle and the cultists as the Terminators dragged one of the knights to the edge of the circle. It protested feebly against its restraints, twin thermal cannons wiggling about ineffectively with their power cables cut. As the chanting reached its apogee, The cultists simultaneously plunged their knives into the bellies of their respective prisoners, ripping upwards, and then kicking the screaming human forward. Each sacrifice writhed in the carved trenches, their blood streaming from their fatal wounds and flowing into the design. As the blood filled the center of the carving, it revealed arrowed spokes that formed into the 8-pointed star of chaos, the unholy octet. The vitae glowed with a burning magma hue, pulsing like a profane heartbeat. "Vor Victus Vitae!" cried the apostle. "Blood for the blood god!" His arms raised into the air as the cultists echoed the cry, and the blood in the center of the octet fountained upward of its own accord. It curved in the air and arrowed toward the hapless rock of the faithful. The torrent burst over the night, becoming a shower of crimson that first spattered, then coated the machine. The mighty war engine's exhaust stacks and war horns let loose an almost agonized wail that took on more human tones as the screams of the trapped pilot within merged with it. The rain ceased as the octet emptied, and the night huddled, trembling. Then, the eyes of the machine flared to life, and it rose up, snapping chains with fire blasting from the exhaust stacks. The power cables to its guns re-knitted, and its Terminator guards stepped back too late as wrathful waves of heat pounded out and cooked the heretic Astartes in their armor. It took 2 thunderous steps, then dropped ponderously to one knee, bowing to the demon prince. "Lord, I give you Karok, the scalding hatred," intoned the apostle reverently. The Gorewolf nodded, and the newly transformed Chaos Knight rose. It marched to his side, glaring towards its sibling engine. Expectantly? Contemptuously? The demon prince didn't know, nor care. The last of the prisoners were brought forward as the corpses of the previous victims were pulled unceremoniously from the blood gutters. The ritual began anew as the remaining Terminators dragged the doom of the wicked into position. Having witnessed the fate of its counterpart, its struggles took on new strength. The Terminators fought to keep it chained down as it thrashed about, determined to avoid the corruption. Once again, the chanting rose and the sacrifices were cast down. The blood fountained up and unerringly surged over the remaining night, and just like its sibling, the doom of the wicked howled. It did not succumb. It writhed and thrashed as the blood rain became a trickle, but it remained untainted. "More blood! More sacrifices!" cried the apostle, and berserkers stepped forward, butchering surprised cultists with knife and chain axe, adding their lifeblood to the gutter. But even with a fresh deluge washing over it, the doom of the wicked fought on to remain pure. "Lord Corval, perhaps Astartes' blood is required? I shall have my marines take their own lives if necessary," spoke the apostle, impertinently using the Gorewolf's name instead of a title.
"That will not be necessary,"
he replied, coiling himself.
"This one is mine."
With that, the gold-turned brass launched across the ritual altar, slamming into the thrashing knight and bowling it over. It bucked and strained, trying to heave the monstrous demon off, but the Gorewolf had it in a bear-hug grip. A smile slashed across his muzzle as a hissing steam began to pour from where the two made contact in their embrace. With a barking laugh, the demon began to sink into the chassis of the Imperial Knight until only the machine remained. It stilled, and a hush fell over the plateau. Then it heaved upwards, eyes flaring and chainsword roaring. The Vox speaker in its face tore apart like a jaw opening, the twisted shards of metal forming jagged teeth. "Lord?" queried the apostle.
"I am Paradum, the overthrower, the supremacy of form, and I am safe as death."
The tearing of fabric filled the air as Captain Laertes freed her third arm, the clawed appendage bursting through the side seam of the dress uniform. The ruse had been successful, wiping out both Astra Militarum and Orc alike. With both internal and external threats to Dirkden eliminated, the family was free to consolidate their power over the hive sprawl. Contemptuously flicking the captain's insignia from her shirt onto the corpse of the lieutenant she'd shot. Harker? Hargrade? It didn't matter. She stepped over him towards the tunnel entrance. The only real threat to their rule now was the enforcers of the Adeptus Arbites, and plans were already underway to deal with them. Clamavus Protrek, she called, and the orator stepped to her side. Supervise the mopping up here with the tanks and brood brothers. All other family members are to come with me to the undermining. With a nod, the Clamavus stepped back and activated his loudhailers, bellowing orders to the followers of the four-armed emperor on the field in between inspirational rhetoric. As Laertes entered the enormous elevator just inside the tunnel she'd only just used to infiltrate her armor and soldiers behind the Imperial lines, she was joined by squads of her acolytes, fearsome hybrids, and hulking aberrants all fresh from the slaughter. It took over an hour to descend into the furthest depths of the hive sprawl's foundations. Down in those darksome depths, teams of sappers and engineers had been carefully carving away the support pillars for the Arbites' main watch station. By now, they should be ready for the final charges to be set to bring down the core of law and order, and she wished to give the order personally. When the elevator cage finally shuddered to a halt, Laertes stepped into the tunnel entrance with as much pomp and pride as possible. Now was the time. The final victory was hers to be laid at the feet of their patriarch, and she would be rewarded. No one was there to receive her. How could this be? She had sent word of her coming. Where were the laborers shouting the praises of their lord and master, praising her? Instead, only empty carved rock walls and buzzing glow lamps strung along the ceiling acted as her welcome party. Could they still be working deep within? Putting hasty finishing touches on the work for her arrival? Thrusting her more human arms forward, index and middle fingers pointing down the tunnel, she gave the gesture of advance, and her acolytes crept down the hall to investigate. Long moments later, she heard the all-clear whistle, and she advanced along with her enormous, aberrant bodyguard. She was surprised to find the heroic hunter Mercy Kill, as it was a mercy if she killed you, among the acolytes in the next chamber. All around the room, explosive charges were in various stages of being set. Some sort of huge metal doorway was set into the far wall, its twin doors apart just wide enough for two people to walk through. There was no sign of the work party other than scattered tools. "Greetings, my Primus," said the Kellermorph with a tip of her hat. "I arrived just before you did. I have touched nothing, found no one." "Curious. I don't recall this doorway on any map. Do you?" "No, Primus. From the scorching it looks like one of their initial charges uncovered at least part of it, and they dug out the rest. They may have gone inside, but there has been no answer to any of my call and response whistles." Laertes screwed up her ridged brow in thought. "If it's not on any map, it is either very old or very secret. I know Overseer Gertis. He would not have investigated on his own." "Want me to check it out?" Laertes nodded. Mercykill gave a theatrical bow, drew her 3 pistols, and skulked to the entryway, taking cover against the rightmost door. After a quick glance inside, she slid into the shadows beyond. Laertes waited. And waited. Around her, the aberrants fidgeted with their enormous weapons. She waited. Flashes of light flared dimly beyond the doorway. A fraction of a second later, the distinct pop, pop, pop of Mercy's auto pistols cracked out. Silence. Laertes' heartbeat thundered in her ears as her blood pressure rose. More flashes, more pops. Then, a bright flash of green light. A scream that was abruptly cut off. It couldn't have come from Mercy Kill. It was too terrified, too agonized. She must have finished off whatever was in there. No doubt she would come swaggering out any second. Any second now. Now. A beam of light stabbed out from the doorway, the same color as the previous flash, and speared into an acolyte. A corona of energy built around him, and he screamed, the same kind of scream that she had just heard as he was disintegrated layer by layer until nothing was left. Green eyes flared into life from the darkness beyond. With a trembling hand, she made the gesture of attack.
We have arrived in the sub's foundation excavation layer, Engine Seer Lakshmi. The lift's machine spirit declares the insurgent Xeno worshippers have not left. Optimal. Relay my thanks to the machine and detail a tech priest to massage its wiring and anoint it with oils and unguents so that it is rewarded and purified from their heretical touch. Initiating tactical subroutines. Topology, excavated tunnel. Enemy disposition, unknown. Preferred engagement scenario, ambush. Deployment map, calculated. Skitari, take position behind those rocks, enfilade formation. Infiltrators, advance, scout, engage, protocols. Retreat to my position once they are committed. The Cataphrons and I will meet those who survive the Skitari rifle fire. Datasmith Sundaresh, hold the lift with your Castellans in case of retreat, outflank, overrun scenarios. Deploy. Linking Auspex and Vox communications with Infiltrator Squad now.
Approaching tunnel end. Detecting increased air ionization and gunpowder residue consistent with energy and solid projectile weaponry. Alert! Aberrant class hypermorphs on rapid approach vector. Engaging, and...
They come for us. Skitari, free fire protocols.
Acknowledged and firing. Engine Seer, they are ignoring our weapons fire and charging to your position.
Cataphron, brace to receive charge. Grind them beneath the great cog. Two aberrant class and one leader cast have broken through. Prepare to engage, Datasmith. All others eliminated. Skitari, what is your status?
All other targets eliminated, Engine Seer. They ran directly into our guns with no self-preservation protocols active.
Such behavior is 88% indicative of flight from a superior... Skitari, retreat to my position. Engine Seer, new contacts. Under heavy Gauss fire from Necra. Repeat, Alpha. Confirm Gauss weaponry. Alpha! Datasmith Daresh, we are retreating to your position. Prepare to engage Necron forces. Cataphron, bodyguard protocols, and pull back. You
have awoken us, insects. Now this world will be ours once again.
Darkness. Heavy, pressing weight. Nothing. No thoughts. Now, light. Muffled, baffled sound. A hand. Reaching. Finding... my hand? The light became searingly bright as the Space Marine was pulled from the pile of bodies. His legs buckled underneath him, and he was gently set on the ground.
Easy there, brother. Let the catalepsian trance wear off. Your muscles will work soon enough.
His jaw cracked as he stretched out his mouth, saliva starting to flow back into the parched planes of his tongue.
Do you remember your name?
Sergeant Ephemius. We were fighting the Death God. Ephemius started as a wave of heat and light flowed over him. A Marine with a flamer was dousing the pile of slain Death Guard he was previously buried under with cleansing fire. More of the battle came back to him as he rose slowly, carefully, to his feet. My squad?
They died heroes, Sergeant. You're lucky to be alive, and even luckier we found you before lighting the corpse pile you were in. Now, Epimeus, do you know who I am?
You're... What little color had returned to his face left it rapidly again. You're Manius Calgar. Epimeus' legs gave out again, this time purposefully as he dropped to his knees. I apologize, Chapter Master Manius Calgar. I am honored to be rescued by you, and will accept whatever punishment for my laxity in thought you deem fit. Calgar chuckled.
No need for that, Sergeant. You and your squad held the line here longer than anyone thought possible, so it's I who am honored to be your rescuer. On your feet now.
The enormous gauntlets of Macragge gripped Epimeus and gently lifted him as if he were a mere child. The fingers flexed into mighty fists as Calgar turned away from him.
We'll need more heroes like you very soon, Epimeus. Reinforcements have been slow in coming, and I fear that the situation is going to get worse before it gets better.
Sir, with you at our head, we cannot possibly fail. We will purge this planet of all the Xenos and heretic scum and return it to the Emperor's light.
I thank you for your faith, Sergeant. See Lieutenant Ulandres for your new squad assignment.
Epimeus crashed his fist across the cracked and battered Aquila on his chest plate. For Macragge, for the Primarch, for the Emperor! Marnius Calgar nodded absently, his vision and thoughts focusing on the mountains to the south, where a deep red suffused the swollen clouds, and brass-colored lightning crashed against the peaks. Ave Imperator! Vigilus stands! The Imperium holds!
Chaos cannot be stopped. The Necrons have awoken. Vigilus will burn.